We're going to get started today. So I just decided I'm going to do a more expanded version of this. Uh, and this is broker talk time. So that means you guys feel free to unmute and jump in, ask questions, etc. So this is going to just be a brief little overview of best practices. And kind of like I like to call it the always list and the never list because it kind of boils it down to its simplest form. And again, this is an interactive meeting, so I tend to get up here and just start talking. So I want you guys to chime in, ask for clarity, ask for questions, etc. So this is your time, and I want you guys to make sure you understand. But this is kind of a good way to kind of have some bullet point takeaways of kind of what the do's and don'ts of our business are in general, so that we make sure that we are staying compliant, certainly on the basic fundamentals. So let's go ahead and get started. First with the always list. So here's a couple consistent things that you always have to do in order to be compliant as a real estate agent in Georgia. You have to present all offers. There's really no exception to that. That means verbal. That means if an offer comes to you on a piece of a sticky note, a paper napkin, on some other contract, even from another state, something that your seller would probably never sign, and you would never advise your seller to sign because it's a hot mess. It doesn't matter what form, all offers, no exceptions, have to be presented. So now we have with compensation, and we have some new options in our listing agreements. One of the new options in our listing agreement for 2025 is that a seller is not willing to offer any buyer broker compensation. My fear with that is that if you have a listing agent that has a seller who has agreed to that in their listing agreement, that if you present an offer to that agent and that agent says, oh, our seller is not agreeing to offer any buyer broker compensation, you need to revise that offer and remove that condition. That's legally not something that that agent should do, because all things are negotiable. And it's just like if you ask the seller to pay closing costs on the buyer's behalf, all of those things are negotiable. And while the seller has every right to state that in their listing, and they have every right not to authorize their listing agent to advertise any buyer broker compensation, if an offer comes in with terms other than that which the seller ideally wants, that offer still has to be presented, and it doesn't get filtered, and it doesn't get sent back and told that it needs to be revised. It gets presented. And is the seller obligated to accept it? Absolutely not. Is the seller obligated to counter it? Absolutely not. All the agent has to do is prove that they presented that offer. And if the seller is interested and doesn't like the specific terms, then they can always counter that offer. But all offers have to be presented, no matter what, no exception. And as far as verbal offers, because that counts as well, I would recommend that if you receive a verbal offer on a listing, that you send an email or text message, but an email is better, to the seller and explain to them that you just got a call from an investor, whatever, and they offered blah, 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 blah. You're obligated to present all offers. You just wanted to make them aware. So I realized that real estate contracts have to be in writing in order to be binding and enforceable, but all offers means all offers. And this is a Georgia Real Estate Commission rule. It's a license law. It's also Beretta, and Beretta is a statute, Title 10-6A of the Georgia statutes, and it's what brokers get sued for. And then it also could potentially be a violation of fair housing if someone felt that their offer was not presented, even though you may have a different feeling and a different intention as the listing agent who didn't present it. But if the person whose offer it was felt that they were being discriminated against because of a protected class, and that was the reason that their offer wasn't presented, you could be looking at a fair housing violation. Does that make sense to everybody? Thoughts, comments? Okay. Number 2 on the always list. Always include the name of the licensed brokerage firm that holds your license in all forms of advertising where you're identifying yourself as being in the real estate industry. There's no exceptions to that. Your finger attached to a body, and the body is the brokerage, and you must always identify, whether it be social media, whether it be your website, whether it be a business card, a postcard, your name or team name, if you will, cannot stand alone in any form of advertising where you're identifying that you're in the real estate business. This is a huge problem. We see this violation a whole lot, and it's really kind of brutal if you get reported to the Real Estate Commission for this. And I would say that the number one people that are likely to report you would be your fellow agents that are either competitors or co-op agents or somebody you have a rift with or what have you. But nevertheless, it can be really ugly as far as a very intrusive investigation into your practices if you get reported for advertising, especially a team name. If that team name's incorporated, they can actually say you're advertising that you have an unlicensed real estate firm. So it can get really, 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 really involved. They can cause you to shut down your website and unpublish it. They can cause you to shut down all your social media while the investigation is going on. They can make you redo all kinds of signage, all kinds of cards and marketing materials. So it's very, very important. The other thing is that I should have added to this, and I will go back and add it later. This is a new presentation, but you have to also get all forms of advertising approved by a broker. This isn't our rule as the broker. This isn't us just being nitpicky. This is actually a Georgia Real Estate Commission rule. And the reason for that is because if you're having the broker approve all your advertising, you're less likely to be in violation. And if the broker approves something and you can prove the broker approved something that's a violation, the broker's also going to be in trouble and get fined and penalized as well. So it's very important that all advertising include the name of the firm. And again, that is not our rule, that is a license law and Georgia Real Estate Commission rule. Now, when it comes to advertising property, and that includes social media where property would be advertised, that includes websites where property would be advertised, every single solitary page must include the name of the brokerage firm and the brokerage phone number. And the brokerage firm name and phone number have to be as frequent, as large, as bold, as prominent as your name or team name and your phone number. And if one or the other is to exceed prominence or frequency or font size, it has to be the brokerage name and number, not your name and number. So that's very, very important. And again, these are not new rules. However, my understanding is, and I don't have the particulars, so I'm not going to talk about it until I do have the information, that there could be some changes coming this year on advertising guidelines, and they'll be voted on very, very soon by the Real Estate Commission. And then there'll be a period of time before they actually go into effect. And once I have those details, I'll be certain to share those with you guys. But believe me, the rules will get stricter. They're not going to get easier. They're going to get more strict. And the reason for that is because agents are not following the rules on a wide scale. We see agents on social media especially, but we see that also on their websites and different places advertising themselves as being in the real estate business with just their name. We see their team name and a picture of them and everything except for the name of the brokerage that holds their license. We see it in their email signatures, which by the way is a form of advertising. We hear it in their voicemails. It's the type of thing that if you are advertising that you're in the real estate industry, you have to make sure that you are advertising that you're the finger attached to the body and the body is the brokerage. And your name cannot be advertised singularly, or your team name cannot be advertised singularly without the name of the brokerage also being advertised. Number 3, always disclose your status as an owner of a property in all forms of advertising, whether it's a landlord, tenant, seller, buyer, etc. So you always form a disclosure advertise as an owner agent in all forms of advertising, the sign, the MLS, the print advertising, postcards, etc. And in all of the legal docs, the brokerage agreement, the purchase and sale agreement. And one thing that we typically see, which you cannot hide behind, is agents who are an owner of an LLC, for example, who advertise very vaguely that managing member of LLC is a licensed agent in Georgia. That's not going to fly. That's really not telling the public that you, the listing agent, is that managing member. So I have an example here, number 3, which is a more transparent and proper disclosure. Seller's agent is managing member of LLC that owns the property and is actually acting as a principal in this transaction. So that would be a more detailed disclosure. And another good practice would be to state seller's agent, blank, your name, and then license number is a managing member of LLC that owns the property, is acting as a principal in this transaction. So again, very, very important that it be extremely transparent. Number 4, this is something that we're seeing entirely too often, and I want to bring it up to you
I
guys.
had a question about number 3.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I am a corporation and all my checks, all my real estate checks go to my corporation. I am listed as an agent with my name, not my corporation. It's really just who gets paid. Do I also have to disclose that I'm part of a corporation, even though it's, like I said, it's really just to get paid in the right place and for taxes?
Correct. No, the answer to that, Carlin, is you are correct. Carlin is the one that has the real estate license, and you're the finger attached to the body, not your corporation. Your corporation is not a licensed real estate firm. It's not practicing real estate. So the only time that would need to be disclosed is if you owned property under an LLC and you're acting as a principal, then you would have to disclose like this. But for purposes of you advertising, Carlin is in the real estate business, you are the licensee and your corporation is not. It does not practice real estate. And if you had like the Carlin team as a corporation, then we would say you can use that team name. Now, I'm giving you a heads up right now, team names might go away. I'm just telling you, it's possible, or they're going to become more restrictive in their advertising. That's what I'm hearing from the people that I know in the education department at Real Estate Commission. Don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that means. I'm just telling you that things are going to change. But if you had a team name, you could advertise the team name as long as you had that in an agreement with your broker to do that. But the team name could never stand alone. And again, the team name is not the licensee. You're the licensee. So it'd be very important, because I've actually seen agents that had a team name like the Fantastic Four, whatever team, and they advertised it in social media and did not advertise the name of the broker. And a competitor, reported them. And that agent did a big bio out to social media to warn other agents, and explained that because her team name was also incorporated, that in addition to the license law violations and the Georgia Real Estate Commission rule violations, they tacked on the charge, which could cause her to have to hire a criminal defense attorney, and accused her of operating an unlicensed firm because that LLC was an LLC and it's not licensed. And she's identifying to the public, Joe Blow public, that the Fantastic Four LLC is, for all intents and purposes, a real estate firm. And it's not, because her real estate company that's holding the license and practicing the real estate is nowhere in that advertising. And she's a finger attached to that, and it's nowhere in that advertising. Okay, so they do not play around. Now, they ended up lowering the fine, but her fine was $1,000, plus she had to pay them back for like $600 for the investigation, plus she had to take CE classes and what have you. The investigation took months. Her website had to be unpublished. All of her social media had to be taken down, and she had to give them tons and tons and tons of documentation to vet all of the stuff that she had been doing for the past however long in her real estate career. It's not pretty. It's not pleasant. And it's extremely common. It's right now, I'm telling you, from what I'm observing, from emails I get from agents, from social media I see on Facebook, and things that I see out there, number 3 is your number one problem. Number 3 is your number one infection by far. And when I teach classes, and I mention this in classes, I have these funny little jaw-dropping faces around the room, like, uh-oh. And I'm like, you guys have no idea. It's not something that's necessarily going to cause you to lose your license, but you're going to suffer if you end up getting reported for this. It's not going to be cheap, and it's not going to be fun, and it's not going to be pretty. And it's also not going to be quick.
Well, and it's sort of along the same lines. If I were, for example, helping my brother sell his house, I have no ownership in his house. I am just helping him as a real estate agent. I might give him a break on the commission, but do I have to disclose that in different places?
Yes, that is in that same field. You would use, and this is why you're thinking of it, and that's great. I couldn't fit it all on here, but I'm going to make a much more expanded version of this. As a matter of fact, I'm teaching a more expanded version of this, and I'm going to be in March. I'm going to relaunch a class that I haven't taught in many, many years on real estate advertising. And we're going to take a deep dive into all of this, including the new upcoming changes and right and wrong and good and bad, good, bad, and ugly, and all kinds of stuff. But the paragraph 10 in the front page of your purchase and sale that says material relationship, that's where you would disclose your owner agent status. And that's where you would also disclose any material relationship, such as a family member relationship or any material. Basically, what I tell agents is, when in doubt, disclose. So even if the buyer is your husband's coworker, okay, it's your husband's coworker. Is there any relationship you have with the party you're working with, or any of the parties, meaning buyers or sellers, in this transaction other than just being their agent? If the answer to that is yes, just put it in there in paragraph 10C, which is the material relationship blank. And same thing with your agent owner disclosure. Thank you so much for chiming in on that, Carlin. I appreciate the contribution and the feedback. This is what this is all about.
Hey,
Number
Angie,
4, we see a lot of
just-
number 4. Monica, did you have a question?
I do, friend. So just as a follow-up to that, when you say relationship, I just want to clarify that is bloodline, family specifically.
You know, I'm not going to, I don't want to pigeonhole it. There's a definition in the contract. So you can read the definition that's in the body of the contract in section B, which starts on page 2, B10, paragraph C, because all the numbers match up. There'll be a definition of what a material relationship is, and you can read that to get clarity. But my whole thing is, do you have a relationship with that person other than just being their real estate agent? If so, I think it's best that you disclose it, because it deflates anybody wanting to make anything of it if nothing is there. If that's your best friend, then state, buyer is buyer's agent's longtime personal friend or something to that effect. I just feel like it squelches anybody wanting to make a thing about something when it's not a thing.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty vast and broad, because I'm thinking, like, what happens when you get a referral from a best friend, right? Like, this, am I getting,
then that's
that's just a
nobody
referral?
cares about the referral where you got the referral from. That's not key, because that friend that referred them is not a part of the contract. This is just a buyer, a person that you know them as the buyer, you know them as the seller. That person that is your friend that referred them is not a party to the contract. So that's not something that would need to be disclosed. But for more clarity, you can read in the purchase and sale agreement, flip to the body of the contract. I'm going to say page 4 or 5, look at paragraph 10 and section, I think it's 10C, and it will give you the actual definition of what they are determining to be a material relationship.
Okay. Yeah, and I've seen it and read it. It's just yeah. Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, paragraph 4. This is something that fortunately we don't see it that often, but we are seeing it more than we should. And we're going to talk about the never list in a minute, and rule number 1, which is don't take advice from other agents. And what I mean by that is don't do what they do. Just because you see other agents engaging in a certain practice doesn't mean you need to do it. But stay in your lane. Okay, so stay in your lane. This is a big loaded one. Stay in your lane as a real estate salesperson and disclose any additional relationship or role you have in the transaction other than that of the real estate agent. If you also work for the insurance company, or if you also work for the security company, and perhaps you are recommending that they use this security system or something to that effect, or if you also own your own home staging company, guess what? The real estate broker that is the finger, that you're the finger attached to that body only does real estate sales. That is what our commission earning is for. It is for the sale of real estate. We are earning a real estate commission for that purpose. And when you engage in a broker agreement, you're engaging the broker for brokerage activity. You're not engaging the broker to be a home renovator. You're not engaging the broker to do a personal loan for that client. You're not engaging the broker to front money for renovations on that house. You're not engaging the broker to be a home stager. You're not engaging the broker to do any of these other things that are not directly brokerage activities of the type of brokerage activity that that broker does. And so what we occasionally run across are situations where agents will do an additional service for a client outside of their real estate brokerage activity and lump that into the special steps of the brokerage agreement, and try to seek to be paid through the broker, through the commission, if you will, or reimbursed through the commission for either their own out-of-pocket expenses, which didn't involve the broker, or their side business and side activity, which is something the broker is not directly involved in. That is a big no-no, okay? Because again, when you are signing, and you have every authority as the agent to sign a brokerage agreement to engage the broker, you're engaging the broker to perform brokerage activity, not to do all these other things. If you are wearing more than one hat in a transaction, as long as it's not illegal, then that's a separate contract between you and that other person. And in all docs, you must disclose that material relationship, that I am also a licensed contractor who's doing home improvements. I own a renovation company, XYZ Renovations, and we are also renovating the property. And you need to disclose that also in the purchase and sale agreement, because the buyer buying the property needs to know that you were, as XYZ Home Renovations, doing the home renovations in the property as well as the listing agent. You wore both of those roles, but that's your own separate business that has nothing to do with the broker. The broker's not going to help collect that money, and that's not real estate commission. So again, very important that you keep that non-brokerage activity separate and not put that in your real estate brokerage engagement. And if you have a question about that, all you have to do is reach out to us and seek our advice, and we will definitely chime in and help give you some guidance and tell you where those boundaries are. Okay, the never list. And again, this is just a little glimpse of some of the chunkier ones. I say this in class. For many of you who've been in my classes, you know, rule number 1, don't take advice from other agents. Rule number 2 is don't take advice from customers or clients. And rule number 3 is don't take advice from loan officers about how to write contracts and how to do your job. You need to seek advice from your broker before proceeding. You can hear people say stuff. You can hear them out and listen to them. And there'll be occasions where a very wise very reputable, very experienced agent will give you advice, and their advice could be excellent advice. But we just don't want you to blindly follow what another agent says, and we certainly don't want you to blindly follow the behavior that another agent conducts themselves in, which is a lot of what we see when we're looking at all these advertising violations. What we're seeing is agents breaking rule number one. They're seeing all these other agents advertising themselves all over social media and on websites with their team name and promoting them team name and their picture and their name and not including their brokerage anywhere. They're seeing that all over the place, and they're thinking, if this is such a widespread thing that I see all over the place, it must be okay, because look at all these really popular, famous, busy agents that are all doing it. They must have some secret information I don't have. This must be okay. So so that's what why I say rule number one, don't take advice from other agents. That could mean a lot of different things. Rule number two, don't take advice from customers. If a customer says to you, well, why can't we just terminate this? Why can't we just talk to the buyer directly without their agent? Why can't you just negotiate this such and such? Why can't I just cut them a check after closing for those repairs, et cetera, et cetera. So because those things are illegal. And so we have to be very careful. Well, why can't you just advertise that all applicants that fill out an application have to speak English? Well, that's a violation of fair housing and license law and Beretta and every other law I know of. So, you know, we've got to be very careful not to break those rules. When it comes to loan officers, I can't tell you how many times I hear people say the lender is okay with it. The lender said, I heard this a week ago, and it was told to me by an agent, and then the agent contacted the closing attorney, and the closing attorney's supervisor happens to be one of my dear, longtime 20-year friends, and so I ended up having to call the supervisor of the closing attorney to explain to her what that not only was the agent being advised by the loan officer to basically commit loan fraud, but so was the closing attorney, and they were all saying, but the lender's okay with it. And at the end of the day, that loan officer who's talking to you guys is not the lender. It's not their money, okay? And when they're saying, I don't want to see this amendment, I don't want to know about it, you need to do it on the side, they're saying you need to commit mortgage fraud. Because guys, all parts, there could be no side agreements. All parts of a agreement between a buyer and seller must be known and approved by the lender. There could be no side disbursements that or payment of money or agreements regarding repairs or anything else between a buyer and seller that the lender does not know about and has not approved of. And we hear people tell us all the time, but the lender said it was okay. The lender said, we don't want to see that amendment. The lender said the underwriting department doesn't want to see that. The lender doesn't want to know about that $150,000 credit. The lender doesn't want to know. That's not absolutely, that is 1000% not true. The lender would say no. The loan officer giving this advice knows that the lender will say no. So they want the deal to close because they're going to make a commission. And so they are saying, do it on the side between yourselves, and we don't want to see it because it's not going to get approved. Well, that side agreement is a felony mortgage fraud. You making your commission check is an additional felony. You knowing about it and somebody else knowing about it is conspiracy, and that's a third felony. So when I say rule number 3, don't take advice from loan officers about how to do your job, I cannot stress that enough. The loan officer is quote unquote not the lender. It is not their money. So when in doubt, you know, contact us, and we will certainly contact other people in other divisions to try to get to the bottom of what's going on and get this put back on the road the correct way. Number 2, don't advertise that a property use is not accurate per zoning or other restrictions or exaggerate a feature in the property. So this is a biggie. This is ethics. This is license law. But you'll have situations where people have taken, for example, a single family home and converted it to a duplex. Well, if the tax records or don't show that, that's a red flag. If you contact planning and development or look up the zoning and it's still zoned as a single family residential and it's not been changed to multifamily, you can't advertise it as a multifamily, even if that's how it is now and that's how it's been changed. And for that matter, if there's any improvements that have been done that were not permitted, which is a big deal, and this happens a lot with investors that buy property and flip property, if there's any improvements that were done without a permit, that also has to be disclosed. And as with any material relationship about the property, it doesn't matter if it's sold as is or not. It doesn't matter if the investor ever lived there or not. If they know of any material defects in the property, they have to disclose it. And if they refuse to disclose it, you as their agent have to disclose it. So an unpermitted improvement to the property that could be later discovered by the county and caused to have to be put back to its original state is a huge defect that has to be disclosed. And so we have, customers, again, this falls into the rule number 2 category of don't take advice from customers and clients. We have customers and clients out there that are savvy investors that are like, hey, I'm going to make this into a multi-tenant apartment building or a boarding house or this or that. Or, hey, Carlin, I finished out the basement in my home and I want you to advertise that as an income property. It's an apartment. I made a complete apartment down there. So my first question is, did you pull permits? And if so, does the county have all this, the permits for the kitchen and the bathroom and all the things you put in there, et cetera, et cetera? If not, then that has to be disclosed. And number 2, I can't, if I see that this is still in your cookie cutter neighborhood with your HOA and your planned subdivision, that everything in your subdivision is zoned single family residential, including your house, I can't advertise this as a multifamily income producing property with an apartment because it's a single family residence. What Carlin could advertise it as is a finished basement with a kitchen and a bedroom and a bathroom and a living space, because that's what it is. But if those improvements weren't approved and permitted by zoning, then the seller has to disclose that. If the seller refuses to disclose that, the agent has to disclose that. And the buyer may say, I love these improvements so much that I'm fine buying it the way that it is, even though it wasn't permitted. The work was done really well. I'm fine buying it the way that it is, and I'll buy it anyway. But the bottom line is, you as the agent can't say it's an income producing property. If somebody wants to go out there and rent their basement that they finished off without our assistance and be in violation of zoning, that's their choice. We can't do the advertising to say that this is legit and okay when it's actually not. So that burden is on us as the real estate professional to know what's right and wrong, what's accurate and inaccurate, what's legal and not legal. And when in doubt, ask us, the broker team, and we will help you figure out how to easily find this information. And I'm telling you, finding out the facts about whether something is permitted or not is a 5-minute phone call. It's looking on certain public records. It's, checking zoning, it's checking your tax record sometime. It's not difficult to figure this stuff out. Sometimes you just have to not turn a blind eye because it can get you sued. It can get you sued, the broker sued. It can be very costly and very nasty.
And Angie, I had a question about that. It wasn't exactly similar. I recently I was previewing a listing for a client who's out of town. The listing said it was fully renovated, had all these fancy new appliances. That just wasn't the case. There were no appliances. I don't think it had been painted in 10 years. Now, I reached out to the listing agent and I said, it appears there's some discrepancies in your listing. I never heard back from them. I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, but have I done what I should or?
Well, there's actually in the code of ethics, in license law, it says false advertising. So false advertising, you could file a Georgia Real Estate Commission complaint against the agent. And what I would do, honestly, Carlin, is I would take the copy of the advertising versus the reality and bring it to this agent's broker's attention, because the broker is looking at a violation of license law for false statements being made, as well as an exaggeration. In our code of ethics, a grievance complaint could be filed against this agent for exaggerating things, embellishing and exaggerating, newly renovated, fully renovated, not true, not accurate. It simply is not the case. New appliances, absolutely not accurate, not true. So while ethics calls it exaggeration and embellishing and huffing and puffing, it can be very serious, because if someone relies on that huffing and puffing, it could end up in a lawsuit. So, but it is a ethics violation as well as a GREC violation. And what I would want to do is at least bring this to the attention of the broker, because as brokers, we don't know what we don't know. So agents are fingers attached to the body, but the body doesn't know what the agents might be out there doing if no one ever tells us. And we can't supervise stuff we don't know about. We can try. It can be a rule that we have all advertising has to be approved by the broker before you advertise it, but the broker may not have ever walked in that house. They might not even know this is inaccurate, but you walked in that house, you know it's not accurate. And so it's liability for that broker. So not to be a tattletale or get the person in trouble, if you didn't want to go to the extent of doing a grievance complaint or a Georgia Real Estate Commission complaint, I would at least give their broker a heads up that their broker needs to reel them in.
Yeah, because
it
would be obvious to anybody walking in.
Huh?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so number 3, don't mention people. Don't put pictures of people or groups of people in your advertising. And don't use what I call the F word, family, in your advertising. I just saw an ad from an agent from another firm talking about this is a wonderful family home for a family to move into. Families in the protective categories of fair housing. What do you mean by family? You're opening a can of worms by using the word family. What you're trying to, the human being that is going to see that ad, whether that human being is a part of a family, whether that human being is single, whether that human being has a bunch of dogs or doesn't have a bunch of dogs, or a partner or doesn't have a partner, or kids or doesn't have kids, that's irrelevant. What you sell is real estate. You advertise real estate and features of real estate, and you do so accurately, but you do not advertise to try to attract any certain groups of people. And remember, stating a preference for something is just as much a violation as is discriminating against. So when you use the word family, for example, you could be charged with saying you're stating a preference for a family. And then what do you mean by family? What is your definition of family versus what someone else's definition of family is? So familial status is one of the protected categories. And again, in general, we don't want to reference people in advertising. And if someone ever asks you about finding a property based on the people that live in an area, the groups of people that live in an area, or the groups of people in a neighborhood, even if it seems so simple, like, are there any families with kids in the neighborhood? That's a loaded question. I want you to stop, keep your lips pressed together, and think about what they just asked you. It could be a HUD shopper, okay? It could be somebody working for HUD, or it could be somebody trying to bait you for a Fair Housing Department of Justice lawsuit. But nevertheless, you don't know. It's not your job to know who lives in the houses, and you can't comment on people that live in the houses and live in the neighborhood. You can encourage them to come visit the neighborhood at different times and see if maybe they can meet some of the people that live in the neighborhood. you know, become familiar with the neighborhood, but you yourself cannot make comments about, you know, familial status and children and uh, the 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 different categories that people in the neighborhood may or may not fall into. Okay, so just don't fall down that slippery slope. Okay, number 4, don't advise any buyer or seller as to how to terminate a brokerage agreement with another broker, even if they make first contact with you and even if they ask this advice. This is something that you guys are confronted with a lot. I would say probably once every 2 weeks, we get a call of this sort, at least once a month. We get a call of this sort from an agent that's hearing from a lead that found them and is thinking that they've really looked super professional and they're really impressed by their marketing of themselves and they want to work with them. And turns out they are already in a brokerage agreement. Or maybe it's a past client that you had lost touch with and they lost touch with you and now they've hired someone else and they're not happy. And they call you up and they're like, oh, I lost your number and I didn't know what company you're with right now. And I'm so sorry. And I hired this other broker and now I'm miserable and I want to get out of this and blah, 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 blah. And so usually the conversation, because again, you're not expecting this call and you get kind of put on the spot. The conversation has evolved to a certain extent, and then the little red flags start flying for our agent, and then they'll call myself or Tom and they'll ask, is this okay? Because now I'm starting to get a little worried because we had this lovely conversation and now I'm thinking, whoops, I might have maybe said too much and I got to double check and see what I can and cannot do. So when that happens, and that, like I said, is going to happen, or someone who is in an exclusive brokerage agreement, be it a seller brokerage agreement or a buyer brokerage agreement, is going to contact you and say how awful their agent is or how unhappy they are, and that they want to now talk to you about working with them. You have to tell them that it is a license law as well as an ethics violation for you to do anything at all to interfere with another broker's exclusive brokerage agreement. So even though you sympathize tremendously with how unhappy they are, you get it, you understand it, that you're not allowed by law or ethics to interfere or advise them as to what they can do about that situation. However, you can tell them that the agreement they have is not with the agent, it's with the agent's broker. And that the best advice you can give is that they seek to talk to the broker or the managing broker in charge of the company that they signed the agreement with. They don't have to talk to that agent if they don't want to talk to that agent, but they can talk to the broker or the broker in charge. They can email them, they can, call them. You can even look up that broker information on Matrix for them and say, here's the direct email for that broker who shows as the broker in charge for XYZ Realty, and here's their cell phone number. And you can call them and you tell them, you know, what your situation is and ask what your options are. What you don't want to do is say, you can unilaterally terminate, there's a form for it. You can mutually terminate, there's a form for it. That's you interfering, okay? I realize there's unilateral terminations, which a broker with their client can use. I realize there's mutual terminations that a broker with their client can choose to use. You advising somebody else's client that can be used, that's where you're interfering. So that's why we've got to, again, stay in our lane. And then let them know that if and when their relationship with the current broker has ended, you would be more than happy to help them. But right now, the only advice you can give is that they contact the person in charge and ask what their options are. And then let that broker handle their relationship with that client. And number 5, don't tell an agent that you're doing a deal with, or a client that you're working with, or customer for that matter, that an offer or an amendment, either one, is accepted. Don't use that word, seller is accepting, seller's going to accept. It is accepted, they've agreed. The agent sent me back an email and said they're accepting our terms. Don't use that word because it's not true and it's not accurate until it's in writing and the actual signed acceptance is in hand. And that must be delivered because delivery is everything in contract world prior to any time limit on the offer or counter offer, or in some cases, there are a few amendments out there or agreements, other agreements that have time limits. If there is a time limit of any kind, the time limit has not expired at the time the acceptance is delivered. So this is again another thing that is unprofessional, and we have to remember that in our contract language, there's this wonderful paragraph called no authority to bind. And no authority to bind says that we as agents and our conversations with one another and our text messages and our emails and our verbal conversations and all these other things back and forth between agent to agent has no authority to bind our clients. So just because an agent may send a text message or send an email saying the seller's decided to accept your amendment to address concerns, the seller's accepting your offer, you can't take that to the bank until you have the signed acceptance from that seller. Just because the agent said the seller is doing that, 1 minute after the agent sent that message to you, the seller could change their mind, especially if the seller were to get another offer in that just boom, landed in their lap. The agent has to present it. They are not bound by those verbal conversations. They're not bound by those emails or text messages. And the agent is obligated to present all offers and to present them as soon as possible. The seller could sign another offer with another buyer and you've got nothing to stick to. And we get those types of complaints and calls as well, where agents are very upset. And I try to tell them over and over again, you do know that that was nothing but verbal negotiation and that the agent should not have used the word accept. They should have not said it was accepted, but by the same token, you should not have told your client it was accepted because both of you were wrong. The seller had not signed, the acceptance had not been delivered, and so neither the agent communicating that to the buyer's agent should have used that word, and subsequently the agent representing the buyer should not have passed along that same word saying it was accepted when in fact the behavior of acceptance had not occurred. So again, very, very important because at the end of the day, they don't have anything to stand on. It's not enforceable, but you have upset agents and more importantly, you have upset clients where someone had that expectation and it's not true or accurate. Any comments or questions about any of the stuff we've talked about so far?
I had one other question, Angie. It's sort of along the lines of number 3. It's love letters that you get from buyers for listings. Now, recently I got one that had the whole family history. It showed all the kids. It showed how the son and all this sort of stuff. My understanding is as a listing agent, I am not to present a love letter to my seller.
I would say NAR has spoke out about the love letter thing and said that it is opening a door for violating fair housing. And I would say, I would agree with that. It's not an offer. I would let the other agent know that you're not presenting it because it is a potential violation of fair housing. And I would say your offer has been presented, but this is all about the familial status, the family, the people, and this is trying to influence the seller based on the people that would be quote unquote buying and or living in this property, and it is a potential fair housing violation. And so I would let the other agent know that you were not presenting it. Fortunately, we do not see a lot of those going on, but with the love letter thing, that again is a wonderful example, Carlin. And you see how widespread it is of rule number 1 being violated. If we see another agent engaging in a practice, then we do that practice because it seems like the right thing to do. And I'm just going to say this, and I've said this during the GAR forms changes classes and in the mid-year changes classes and in other classes in the past 2 years. that the biggest case of rule number one being violated was what resulted in the DOJ lawsuit and the NAR settlement. Because other agents were out there looking at what other agents were saying. Oh, well, you've got to tell a seller they have to offer a buyer broker commission. Well, you need to tell them that they need to offer at least this much, or else we're not going to show it. Well, you have to tell them that, because that's what gets the deal signed, and that's what really is going on behind the scenes. And we have to do this and we have to do that. And everybody's out breaking rule number one, and nobody's stopping to think that these are not new laws. These are federal fair trade laws that have existed for decades. They're not new. None of them are new. There's no new law, by the way. No new law. There's just laws that are getting enforced. And so it's really important, that we kind of, I'm all about boiling off the fat, if you will, and getting back down to the basic fundamental layer. And that's kind of my way of looking at it. But yeah, the love letter thing, I think it's a violation of fair housing.
Yeah. Do I have to even tell the seller that I have gotten that? I mean, even if I'm not going to show them it, I mean,
I don't know that you have to tell the seller that if it's a violation of fair housing.
right.
So, because they may want to see it. And,
Exactly.
Again, these types of things are kind of on a case by case basis, very uncomfortable. And it may be where if you get an uncomfortable situation and you get pushback like that, we may need to even loop in the broker of the agent and explain to them our concerns and why we feel that this is a fair housing violation, because it's putting perhaps an unfair advantage on that buyer that's not fair to the other buyers that are not doing the same thing, and they may be selected for their familial status or something of that nature. And it's just it's a slippery slope for all of us. So it may be something where we need to bring this to the attention of the other broker, and the other broker may need to then supervise and educate their agent, because their agent's breaking rule number one.
Exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions? Monica, Zena?
I'm good. Thank you, Angie.
Thank
You're
you. And
welcome.
I have a quick question. For the material status, when we have to disclose, what's the course of action we as a professional need to do when we realize or we know that the agent is relative to the seller? Because it happened to me.
Well,
And
if you know that, you can put that in your offer in paragraph 10, even if you're not disclosing about yourself. If you know it and you find out later, let's say you find out later and it's already under a binding contract, it could be added to an amendment. But I would point out to the other agent who failed to disclose the material relationship, I would point out in paragraph 10, in the body of the contract, which is your broker relationship paragraph, there is a paragraph that matches the front of the contract in the same number, same letter. I think it's 10C, that defines what a material relationship is. And you could point this out to the other agent, and then it can be added to an amendment.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, guys, Tom is teaching next. Here's our broker support email, broker@heartatl.com. Tom is teaching part 4 of Contracts 101. This is going to focus on due diligence period, the amendment to address concerns, terminating during due diligence, and also reinstating a contract if one gets terminated and everybody wants to bring it back to life. So that starts in 4 minutes, same link. So if you guys want to log out, I think it's probably best if you log out and then log back in, but that starts in 4 minutes and Tom will be hosting it. So thank you for joining me today, and I will see you again very, very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Angie. Take care. Have a great day.
You too.